listener production.
Hey, it's Antoinette Lattouf with the Weekend Briefing. Investigative journalism is no easy ride. It's a grind of relentless digging that sometimes leads to nothing. But when the story breaks, it can uncover truths that leave you speechless. Award-winning investigative journalist Richard Baker knows this better than most. He's spent years chasing leads, hitting dead ends, and uncovering jaw-dropping revelations. Richard is the host of Listener's gripping docuseries Secrets We Keep. And the latest series, Pray Harder, takes us inside a secretive religious group where a hardline pastor exerts control over every aspect of his followers' lives. With exclusive audio and first-hand accounts from brave congregation members speaking out for the first time, Pray Harder unravels the sinister truth behind this nationwide network. Today we're diving into Richard's world, how he crafts these stories, the challenges of getting them to the public, and the high stakes of investigative journalism. Later in the show, Helen Smith joins me for the weekend list, and we have some fantastic tips for you to round out the year on what to watch, see, eat and do. But first, here's my chat with Richard Baker. Richard, welcome to the Weekend Briefing.
Thanks, Antoinette.
I did my own version of investigative journalism because you aren't the only investigative journalist, Richard, amongst us. And I did a deep dive, my social media stalking deep dive, and I was quite surprised to learn that you don't have Instagram and you don't have X, but you are on LinkedIn and you only post about once a month. As a journo and a podcaster, how does that happen?
Because I'm old.
Oh, no, you're not.
I remember about 10 years ago when Twitter started to become a real thing with journos in the media, and I was at the Age and Sydney Morning Herald then, and there was a push from management for every journo to get on Twitter and just go bananas. Yeah. And I just thought, I will be the other side of the experiment and I'll just not do that and see what happens. And I just thought, I don't want to get caught up in that. And, I know I can be a grumpy bastard. So like Friday night, if I've watching the Cats play footy and they lose and I've had like 2 or 3 beers, I could easily say something I regret the next morning. And I just thought, I don't need that. But as time has moved on, I do wonder whether or not, like now I think probably need to maybe think about having a bit more of a presence there just because it's the way, a lot of people, particularly under 30, under 40, consume media. Like I look at my own kids, I've got teenagers and stuff like that, and where they get their news from.
Well, it's obviously worked well for your journalism. You've won a handful of Walkley Awards, a whole bunch of Quill Awards. So people are consuming and loving your work. A few years ago, you did, though, go out on your own and are an independent journalist. Do you think being in the independence space, even though you do collaborations like you have with Listener, and we're going to get into some of the amazing work you're doing with Listener, do you think once you're in the independent space that online presence is more important?
Yeah, I think it is. That's one thing I'm learning. And, probably when I was with The Age, I didn't even do LinkedIn very much or anything like that. And what I find that useful for is actually finding people that I need to talk to for stories. I find that's a really good way to get someone's contact and get in touch directly. But it's also good for obviously showcasing what you're doing. Since leaving the newspapers and 2 years ago, I have been lucky, to have some really good partnerships with Listener and also then, I do some work as a producer with some TV, documentary projects. Yeah, it's hard to find the time, but it's probably something I'm going to address over summer and have a look at. And I'll probably consult my 17-year-old daughter who is quite well known on TikTok and stuff, so I'm told. So I might have to put her on the payroll.
I was going to say, she'd be the best person to consult or be a social media manager, but I did spot you on Instagram or in an Instagram reel with another bloke who hasn't embraced social media, and that is John Howard. And you were talking about your podcast's Secrets We Keep, Baghdad Nights. What was it like interviewing John Howard about the Iraq War?
It was really interesting, actually, to get the chance to just sit face to face with, a guy I grew up with, and when I was in probably the first phase of my journalistic career. He was the Prime Minister, and Australia was quite a different place back then. So to have that opportunity to be upfront and personal was great. John Howard never concedes much or gives anything in. But to get his first-hand account, I guess, of the thought processes and the way he weighed things up back then, and for me to, I guess, revisit the national security climate post 9/11 in Australia, it was a different feeling in the country for a couple of years then. And so I think that helped shape his decision-making. But, the best thing I was able to get out of him, I think there was a slight concession that maybe his government could have done more to keep an eye on what the Australian Wheat Board was doing with its contracts in Iraq.
That is what the podcast explores, arguably Australia's biggest corruption scandal, and that is when an Australian company funneled hundreds of millions of dollars to Saddam Hussein in the lead up to the war. Yeah,
that's exactly what it's about. And I was, when I was a younger reporter, I ended up writing stories about this scandal and some of the characters involved in it, from the Wheat Board in particular, extensively. And I never thought I or anyone else in the media had 100% of the full story. And there was a lot of media, a lot of journalists spending a lot of time and doing some really good stuff back then. But the missing piece was the stories of the Wheat Board men, the executives who were spending a lot of time in Iraq and thinking that they were doing what was in Australia's national interest, and then after the war in 2003 being sent back in by the Howard government to have senior roles to basically act as spies or intelligence officers to stop the Americans from muscling in, and then to have this massive fall from grace, a short time after, and be the poster boys for this corruption scandal. So that was, I thought, if I could hear their experiences and hear their side of the story, that would provide another window into this whole caper.
And did you find that window? Did you find something, as you said, this is a story that's been covered for years, even by you several years ago. What did you find what pieces of the puzzle hadn't been there before?
The story really focuses on three Australian Wheat Board guys, Trevor Flugie, who was the former chairman, who was depicted in an infamous photograph with his shirt off in Iraq and pointing a pistol at the camera.
Can I just stop you there? Because there's a fascinating backstory about how you got that photograph, right? Didn't a woman just walk into the office and give you the photograph and not say where she got it from or who she was?
Yeah. So this was in early 2006 when this big inquiry into this whole Wheat Board scandal was starting up in Sydney. And I'd written a few stories on it, and I got a call from reception at The Age to come downstairs. There was someone who wanted to see me, and it was a young woman, probably in her mid-20s, like me. And we had a coffee, and she goes, I think I've got something you might be interested in. And literally slided an envelope across the desk, and in it was like a CD-ROM or something like that. And
a CD-ROM.
Took it upstairs, had a look, and there were dozens of photos, but one of the first ones I saw was that one of Trevor Flugie. And as soon as I saw that, I knew that was like literally $1 million photo, and ran downstairs and we haggled out a deal. It's the only time I've really ever paid for information or an image in my career. But I knew it was newsworthy, and got her $800 cash and took the disc, and we ran those photos very soon after, and that really framed the whole story. It put these guys like Trevor Flugie and one of my other characters in the podcast, Michael Long, who was over there and depicted with an M16 machine gun, as cowboys. And that was how the narrative around their conduct and the culture was framed. And I wanted to go and test that in this podcast and see whether or not that was the right thing or the right depiction. Without that photo, I probably wouldn't have done the podcast, because I don't think it would have taken off as a story back then as much, because the image was, it was worth 1,000 words, as an old cliche, you know.
You have spent the bulk of your career as an investigative journalist. What's the most time you've spent on a particular story or one particular investigation?
There's one that a few of my colleagues at the Age, if they listen to this, will know about, that I started looking at in 2012, and I still haven't published it. It's an ongoing thing, and there's many reasons for that. There's issues with, getting one or two key sources on the record. It's also a legally very risky and challenging story to get up. But I think we're getting closer. And Australia's not an easy place for defamation, and it's an easy place to sue for defamation. It's a hard place to defend and very expensive. So that has been a bit of an impediment.
Or to protect whistleblowers.
Yeah, shocking. We need journalism and society needs whistleblowers. But frankly, if I was a whistleblower or someone who could blow the whistle, I hate to say this, but you'd have to think long and hard about it, because there's not much to protect you, and a lot of people can come after you from all sorts of angles for retribution. So I admire them, and I think, the Parliament, there has been a bit of discussion around this. We really need stronger whistleblower protection laws. Bad things don't get exposed, and change doesn't happen without people blowing the whistle on, wrongdoing or, maladministration or corruption or whatever. That's the longest story. But in terms of ones that have been actually published or broadcast, this current one, this podcast we've just released with listener Secrets We Keep, Pray Harder, is 2.5 years of work. And the work's still ongoing. And that podcast is it's an investigation lifting the lid, telling the story of one of Australia's oldest and most extreme and secretive, I say this in quotation marks, cult-like religious groups.
Pentecostal Christian?
Yeah. Down in, headquartered in Geelong, but with affiliated assemblies right across Australia and internationally. And honestly, when I started hearing from people about this in mid-2022, I thought they were pulling my chain or putting a bit of mayonnaise on what they were telling me. And quickly I've found out that, no, this is true. And I've never come across a place so controlling, so many rigid rules and so many harsh punishments for stepping out of line. And what really interested me was the psychology that creates in people who have been brought up in that environment, where any day you think the world's going to end, and that if you're not doing the right thing, you're going to burn in hell. So it creates this loop of judgment and reporting and kind of spying on people that's really destructive.
And I understand that got held up because there were lots of legal proceedings, as you alluded to earlier. Defamation law can really limit journalism. The pastor at the centre of this, Pastor Hollins, he died aged 93 earlier this year. Was him dying removing one of those barriers?
It reduced the risk from a defamation perspective. We would have gone out with it ahead of before he died, but the main reason we delayed was because there was a criminal prosecution of a church member from the Geelong Revival Centre over some serious child sex abuse charges involving 9 kids from the Geelong area. That's not to say they're from the church or whatever. And our story had other historical allegations or confirmed accounts of sexual abuse and other abuse of children in it. And we didn't want to put anything out that would jeopardise the chance for justice for the children caught up in this current matter. Anyway, that man, Todd Hubers, eventually pleaded guilty to all the charges in August this year. And that opened the window for this podcast to finally come out. And unfortunately, or fortunately, the lawyers might say, Pastor Hollins had passed away by then. Personally, I would have preferred it to be out so he could hear what people who've lived under him for decades, what the toll of that has been on their lives.
You've also taught investigative journalism at the University of Melbourne. How confident are you about the media's landscape to continue producing good investigative journalism? Because as you mentioned, one of your investigations is ongoing. It's been going for longer than a decade. Investigative journalism is costly. It's timely, and it's well documented that the business model for journalism is struggling.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a doomsayer here, but it is, to be frank and honest, it's really challenging and it's tough. Just media in general and journalism, but that hardcore investigative reporting that is risky and expensive, it is really challenged because if you're running a business, there are easier ways to make money.
Opinion is really cheap. It doesn't need to be fair. It doesn't need to be true. It's quick and running clickbait headlines off what someone said on Twitter or X about something or other or whatever that, but none of that changes things in our society or forces authorities and politicians to act and checks, journalism's a really important check on power when it's done right. And, society and all different groups in society, you look there are imbalances of power, and when there are those imbalances, there's an opportunity for abuse of that, and people get hurt. And that's where you need investigative journalism to run that check and balance. So, it's hard when you have students there, and but the good thing is there are ABC. Still importantly, yes.
It has the funding, it has the taxpayer funding. There's an expectation and a requirement that it deliver on that, but it can't be the only place in Australia because that's not healthy either. So, we still see some great investigative reporting by my, great mate Nick McKenzie at Nine and the Nine Papers.
60 Minutes.
60 Minutes. Yeah. I mean, Nick's an amazing reporter and it's great to see Nine as a company has backed him and his reporting in so strongly in recent years. And that's important for their prestige as a company too. And I think that is something that you can sell to advertisers. You want to be associated with a serious brand or, a company that puts its money where its mouth is in that respect. I think that is something that can be monetizable or leveraged off in a good way. And I kind of see that with where I'm going with how I try to do things too, that, okay, there's a lot of sugar puff hits of short things and, podcasts out there which all have their place, but you want to come in and actually go deep into a story or something that's going on in our society and hear people living it. And, I try to create a podcast series that makes a movie inside the listener's head. So I put a lot of time into the writing and what it's going to sound like and all of that. And, it's expensive, but I think the lasting impact of doing it that way, the story has a longer shelf life with listeners, and then there's more opportunity to use it as a catalyst for change or for stir up some debate about stuff.
So what podcasts, I'm interested, other than Secrets We Keep, what other podcasts do you enjoy listening to?
I get asked that a lot, and I do have a few regulars that I consume, but when I'm like neck deep in writing a script for one, I tend to avoid anything in that genre or space that I'm doing because I want to find my right voice for that story, if you know what I mean. So I don't want to copy anyone. But when I'm out of that cycle, so now I have a weekly treat that I listen to, which is an American podcast called Script Notes. And it's two screenwriters, Craig Mazin, who wrote Chernobyl and did the series The Last of Us, which was off the PlayStation game, sort of a zombie apocalyptic thing, and another guy, John August. And I've listened to them for years because I'm really interested in the craft of writing stories and, moving part of my working life into scripted and stuff there. And I've found what they talk about fascinating in terms of the craft of writing. And for me, it's a learning experience, but it's also refreshing because it's not always hard news and overly heavy content, and also learning just about the industry. So like they're in Hollywood, what happens with American streaming and podcasting and other companies there tends to trickle through to Australia in terms of trends.
Obviously, when it comes to investigative journalism, there are particular things that pique your interest. Then there's the $1 million picture that lands in your lap. At this point in your career, how much is it that people come to you versus you sniffing around?
I think this point in my career, a lot comes to me, but then you have to sniff.
Yeah, I guess you've built that credibility, you've built that trust. and people want you to tell their stories.
Yeah, your track record, you've got a track record that people can, even though I'm not on social media that much, they can find the body of your work and see what it's like. And then once they realise that you've got that experience and legacy behind you, you find doors open and people will at least give you their time to hear you out. And that is very beneficial for me. I'm pretty much able to get a conversation with anyone I need to.
That's Richard Baker, investigative journalist and host of Secrets We Keep, Pray Harder. You can also check out Secrets We Keep Baghdad Nights. They're both available on the Listener app, and they're both highly recommended docuseries to binge over the festive season. It is now time for the Weekend List. Producer extraordinaire Helen Smith joins me in the studio to share what she's been consuming, what she's been reading, what she's been listening to and watching, and what she reckons you should listen, watch, eat and do as well.
Hey, Antoinette, my first recommendation is a YouTube video by the YouTuber Emma Chamberlain. Now, Emma Chamberlain is like an OG YouTuber. She went from vlogging, videos, and as a teenager, she didn't finish school and she decided YouTubing is for her. And she kind of went from that to interviewing stars and celebrities on the Met Gala red carpet. So she's really grown. She's been in the game for a long time now. She's in her early 20s, which isn't that long, but she's been doing it since she was 14, I think. Maybe even 14 to 16 is when she kind of started popping off. But the latest video, her style has really evolved throughout the years, and it's just a video about her changing her hair. And it's called the Hair Theory video. And I just love the way that she's filmed it. It's really artsy. It's more short filmy vibes. I think if you've watched her original videos and then you see how she's evolved, the start of this video was my favorite part. It's really artsy, the music she puts behind it. And then she kind of just goes, I think it's about 15 minutes long. She kind of just talks about changing her hair and the history of her hair throughout the years and making it into this new thing and the hair theory behind your hair.
Okay. All right. So first I thought you were saying she just had a haircut and made a video.
She kind of did.
But in the process she tells a beautiful story about hair. And
hair theory, her hair throughout the years. She's got diagrams, she's got this. But it's the style and the way she films. It's really cool and really artsy, but at the same time it still feels like a YouTube video. I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's this new era of YouTube that we're in now where these vloggers have really honed into filmmaking styles and I'm loving it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced, but I'm going to have to check it out because I can't imagine.
It's got 2 million views in 3 months. So she's got 12.1 million subscribers.
Okay.
She's a big deal.
Okay. I'm going to have to check it out.
Friends with the Kardashians and everything.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to check it out. I'll tell you my theory on her hair theory.
Thank you.
Okay. So my recommendation is on Apple TV. It's a series called Bad Sisters. The reason I love it, it's based on 5 sisters. I'm one of 5 girls as well. I do have 2 brothers, but I just often talk about the 5 girls. And they are Irish. It's based in Ireland. And it's a wicked revenge fantasy. It's about 5 sisters who attempt to kill a monstrous brother-in-law. So one of the husbands of the sisters is awful. She's in a DV relationship. And I know this sounds really violent and awful. And how could it be entertaining that 5 sisters are trying to plot to kill this man? But I love watching it. And then my sisters and I, we watch it and we're on a text message chain. And we may or may not talk about which brother-in-law we'd knock off first.
To a net.
I mean, it's just drama and fiction and we wouldn't do it. And I, wouldn't hurt a fly, et cetera, every other disclaimer so I don't get into any trouble. But it's written by Irish actress Sharon Horgan. It is so good. So season 1 was out last year. Season 2 is now out and the plot thickens. And you know what I love about it? The way the sisters stress and bicker and throw shade at each other feels so real. We love each other. My sisters and I, we would do anything for each other. I mean, we probably wouldn't kill for each other, but whatever. It's a lovely little take on the sisterly bond that it's a bit sinister and dark and violent. But the way they bicker and fight is just so on point about how, and the different roles. There's the young sister who's got no idea. There's the older mother hen sister. There's a sister. Anyway, I love it. I do recommend watching Bad Sisters. I don't recommend killing your brother-in-law.
Oh, definitely not. My next recommendation is a BBC article that I read the other day, and it's about Shirley Temple. So it's called Being a Starlet Was Difficult, in quotes, how Shirley Temple saved a Hollywood studio from bankruptcy. And they're talking about Fox Studios because at the time it was kind of flailing, and then Shirley Temple kind of came onto the scene and signed up when she was 5 years old. But before that, she was also working from the ages of 3.5 to 5 as a starlet.
Wow.
So she was literally working her whole life. She quit movies at, I think, 22 years old. So she's been working.
She'd already been in the business for 19 years.
Yes. Like, that's insane. It's written by Anne Quinn. And the title alone hooks you in, but as you read through the body of the article, there's also old video interviews embedded throughout, which I really loved because it was Shirley when she was a bit older, when she was already working in politics. So that's something I didn't know about Shirley Temple. She went on to work in politics and in the US government.
Oh.
Yes.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. But I won't give it away because it tells you a bit more of a breakdown of what she exactly did. But she really worked her way up and was quite powerful.
Okay. Well, we'll hyperlink to the story in our show notes.
We'll pop it in the show notes. But one thing that I did take out of it that I think is really good that it's changed nowadays is the amount of money that she was earning, and then the amount that she saw at the end was ridiculously different. Like, she was earning millions as a child star, and throughout there was a time when she was 10 years old, she was actually Hollywood's highest paid star, but then the trust at the end of it was less than $50,000. So it's a really fascinating read, and it makes you want to go on a deep dive about her life.
Wow. Okay, great recommendation. So my final one's a little bit cheeky. If you have private health insurance and you're trying to buy gifts or you don't have a lot of money for Christmas gifts.
Oh, God.
Just hear me out. You can go and get a remedial massage voucher, swipe your healthcare card if you haven't used your $200 over limit, and then give it to your mum or somebody. It's a way to use whatever your benefits are before the end of the calendar year and to give somebody the gift of acupuncture.
This is a great
massage.
hack.
Is it technically allowed? I mean, I'm not sure. Is it illegal? No. Is it unethical? Maybe.
No,
but I mean,
you're paying for the health insurance.
You're paying for the health insurance. It's meant to be for you. Maybe it will be for you. Maybe you gift yourself something and you use it later. Or maybe you gift it and you just give it to somebody else. But a lot of people don't use their extras in their health funds.
I know, I don't. Yeah.
And look, who am I to go in there in defence of health funds and, them making even more money?
The health funds will not care. I'm sorry, like, they make millions.
Yes. So that is oh my God, people are going to be like, what's wrong with Antoinette? She's talking about murdering family members.
And scamming health
funds. No, somebody else suggested it. So they were saying that they did it. And then I went and scanned, and because I haven't used my massages, I've used all my chiro and all my optical and everything else. I'm actually going to use it for myself. I got my vouchers for myself, so I can use them throughout summer because I haven't had time this year. They're valid for 12 months. Oh. So you just go and swipe. Anyway, give it a try.
Look, T's and C's apply. T's and C's apply.
T's and C's apply. Maybe don't try it at home. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my recommendation.
Yeah.
Look, you can check the fine print and check with your health insurer, and hopefully it works for you because it's worked for me. Thank you so much, Helen. That is it for this week. Thank you so much for being with us and tuning in. It is always a pleasure. And if you want more of the Weekend Briefing, you can find us on the Listener app. You can download the Listener app in the App Store and follow us there. Otherwise, you can follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. And why not give us a rating and a review for this interview with Richard? Or let us know how you went swiping your healthcare card for the gift voucher. And don't worry, we'll still be here during the festive season over the next couple of weeks with a bit of a pared back headlines, but you will still get the news and a fabulous deep dive straight to your headphones. Stay safe, everyone. Catch you soon.
Listener.